I 100% agree that the United States owes the black community reparations, and this is why. It's not about white people owing black people. It's not about white people being punished for the sins of our ancestors. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about white people standing in solidarity with a community that has suffered grave, egregious injustices at the hands of the United States government. But first, we must decenter ourselves in this conversation, alienate ourselves from our privilege, and hold the United States institutions and systems accountable for the wrongs that they never rectified. From slavery to black codes, to convict leasing, to Jim Crow segregation, to anti-black housing policies, to mass incarceration, we have never rectified our wrongs as a country. If you look at our criminal justice system, 1 in 3 black males carry convicted felon label. That is a real stat. Is it because they're inherently evil, or they just need more personal accountability? Or is there something larger at play? All the data shows by every statistical measure, the black community has been disproportionately impacted by every institution or system in the United States, from education to healthcare to criminal justice system to banking to housing, which we still have de jure segregation in effect today. And when it comes to housing, neither parties are absolved from this, because both parties were responsible for the de jure segregation that we see today. The New Deal by Franklin Roosevelt didn't invent the segregationist practice of housing, but it did institutionalize it. Restricting access to capital for black families while enriching white families, the big reason why we see the generational wealth gap we see today. And remember, public housing wasn't initially for poor people, it was for working class white families. But because of laws and policies implemented by the United States government, it reinforced segregation, because public housing was to reflect the racial composition of the existing neighborhood.
I am white, and on both sides of my family, we do not have any massive generational wealth. My mom's father is the only one of my 4 grandparents who we got any sort of generational wealth inherited from. And 99% of the wealth that we inherited from my grandfather was from selling his house. My grandfather was born in 1926 in rural North Carolina, and he was a 6'3" white man with blue eyes. And other than being white, my grandfather didn't have that many privileges. He was one of like 7 children. His mom didn't even get to high school level education, and his dad never went to college. They were not privileged in most other ways that we define privilege, but he was a white male in a very, very racist country. What his whiteness allowed him to do was work his way through college. At the time, there were colleges that weren't accepting black people, and he was accepted to college as long as he could pay for it. And he ended up getting a law degree and becoming very successful, and again, never hoarded any significant wealth, but bought a house outside of Washington, D.C. in the 50s in a neighborhood that was redlined. And actually, my mom, who was born in the 60s, remembers in the 70s when the first black family moved into their neighborhood, because it had literally been sectioned off and realtors would not sell to black families. And my mom, who is 58 years old, went to a year of segregated school. So for all of you saying it was so long ago, everyone has equal rights now, get over it. My mom remembers when the first black student joined her class in the 70s in Alexandria, Virginia. In 2015, my grandfather died, and we sold his house that he bought for around $100,000 in the 50s, and we sold it for $1 million. That money was divided among his children, and my family was able to get out of a lot of debt, and it completely reset my ability to go to private versus public school, my ability to afford tutors, my ability to become the educated person that I am. And it was all really because I have a white grandfather. Let me finish. Had my grandfather been black and had all of the other skills and background that he had, he couldn't have gone to the schools that he went to, he wouldn't have been hired in the jobs that he was, and he couldn't have bought the house that he did, that 65 years later, put his family out of debt. So if anyone tries to tell you it's not that deep, it really is that deep. It goes so far back. Any small privilege that a white person has is probably, to some degree, due to their whiteness.
Why Black Americans never got their reparations, and who still owes what today? Jewish people got their reparations. The Japanese got their reparations. Even the Lockerbie bombing victims got reparations. But the descendants of enslaved Africans in America, the people who built the nation brick by brick, got nothing. Why? Because a promise was made, and then the man who made it was assassinated. In 1865, at the end of the US Civil War, America faced a moral test. 4 million enslaved Africans had been freed. But freedom without compensation, without land, without justice, is just a new kind of slavery and captivity. That's when the Union General, William T. Sherman, issued Field Order number 15, promising freed black families 40 acres and a mule along the southern coastline. It was not charity, it was payment, a down payment on 250 years of unpaid labor.
Why does a person that never was a slave deserve compensation from a person that never owned a slave?
Bank of America and much of the U.S. financial system were built on the profits from slavery. They left deep scars that still shape the lives of Black people today. This inherited trauma, known as post-traumatic slave syndrome, is rooted in generations of violence, ripped apart families, and stolen identity. It continues to affect mental health, family relationships, and the overall well-being of Black people. The U.S. government has paid reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II, and even Americans held hostage in Iran.
For a moment, it seemed real. Black families began farming land from Georgia to South Carolina, finally free and independent. But that hope lasted just 4 months, because in April 1865, Abraham Lincoln, the man who had overseen emancipation, was assassinated, and with his death, the promise died too. After Lincoln's death, President Andrew Johnson, a Southern sympathizer, reversed everything. He ordered that the land promised to freedmen be returned to former slave owners, the formerly enslaved who had just begun to taste independence were pushed back into poverty, forced into sharecropping, convict leasing, and systemic exploitation. The promise of reparations wasn't just forgotten, it was stolen. And that theft laid the foundation for generations of economic inequality, from redlining to mass incarceration. That's why when people ask, why do Black Americans still talk about reparations? The answer is simple: because the debt was never paid. Before we delve deeper, please hit like, share, and subscribe, because this isn't just history. This is an ongoing crime scene, and awareness is just the first form of justice. So here's the truth. Reparations aren't radical, they're precedent. After the Holocaust, Germany paid billions to Jewish survivors and to the new state of Israel. The United States paid reparations to Japanese Americans interned during World War II. The families of the Lockerbie bombing victims got reparations. And even Germany paid reparations to Europe twice after both world wars. So when people say, we can't calculate it, or it's too long ago, history says otherwise. Reparations are not impossible. They're just inconvenient for those who benefited from the theft.
Most white people in America and Europe believe about their history is not history at all. It's mythology designed to produce a specific kind of person. A person who does not feel guilty. A person who does not feel accountable. a person who does not feel responsible for ever changing anything because they don't think they're doing anything wrong. They're taught that their ancestors were pioneers, their ancestors were explorers and builders of civilization, that they brought progress and democracy and enlightenment to the world. They hear about the Renaissance, they hear about the Industrial Revolution, they hear about the Age of Discovery, and so forth and so on. Not about enslavement, not about genocide, not about the theft, not about the destruction that their people are responsible for. They're not taught that their prosperity was built on unimaginable suffering. They're not taught that their systems of government, their financial empires, their very sense of national identity are all rooted in exploitation. They don't know about the crimes. They don't know the real legacy of their people, and so they don't change.
This wasn't neglect, it was policy by design. But here's the turning point. There's legal ground for reparations today. Lawsuits can target federal and state governments for breach of contract and constitutional violation. Banks, insurers, and companies that profited directly from slavery owe reparations. States that enforced discriminatory housing and poor labor laws owe reparations. Scholars who proposed a universal reparations model, compensation through cash payments, land grants, tax exemptions, and education funding. Because reparations aren't just about money, they're about restoring what was systematically stolen, like opportunity, identity, and even dignity. So overall, reparations are not revenge, they are repair. Until America faces this truth, it can never call itself truly free. The debt isn't historical, it's unpaid. If you believe justice delayed is justice denied, please hit like, share, and subscribe, because silence won't change anything. The truth will.